Hi, I'm Philip Kiley, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about how I took this sales page. Hey, here I am. I'm going to talk about how I took this sales page and, with the exact same tools and technologies, rebuilt it a few months later as this much better looking sales page. The original page I built in November 2020 using Bootstrap 4, which is at the time what I used for everything, still use it for a lot of stuff, and it is designed to sell copies or free downloads of an information product called Cold Email for Interesting People. So the site is built around two call to action buttons: click here, click here. The whole point of this page is to get people interested in the book and get them to purchase it. The new page has exactly the same goal, still has two buttons that I want people to be clicking on, and is built with the exact same technologies. We're still using Bootstrap 4 and still using my sort of homemade static site generator to power it behind the scenes. The only difference is that I learned a ton about design over the few months between making this in November 2020 and making this in April 2021. And so today's video is to talk about the process of taking a page that has, again, it's got the same URL even, philipkiley.com/CEFIP, and just totally redoing it. This isn't a programming tutorial. We're not going to go in VS Code and check out the actual CSS that I wrote or anything. It's more important than that. It's a tutorial about how to think through revising a page and how to think about design in such a way that you're able to take what are, in my case, extremely basic design skills and make something that looks pretty good. So to start out, let's just talk about the stack really quickly. If you're not familiar with Bootstrap, in 5 seconds, it's a CSS framework that lets you build responsive websites. The reason that I use Bootstrap is mostly so that when I go like that and show it on an iPhone 8 in this case, everything rearranges and looks pretty good. And that's going to be the same on the old site too, because it's also made with Bootstrap. There are a couple of other things that I added on to the new site that made a huge difference. First off, I picked out some fonts. IBM Plex Sans, and then also Merriweather is what's being used for the titles in this site. And then I was also able to use a background from heropatterns.com at one point, and you'll recognize this when I go through the site in more detail. I adapted a small section from this MIT licensed open source template. So beyond that, though, like 99% of the code is coming from Bootstrap. It's using the exact same library from one page to the next. So it's not a tool constraint. The original site isn't a tool constraint. It's just a knowledge constraint on my part back then, making this original page, which again, like, looks okay, did its job, but could be so much better. And so we're going to talk about how to make it better. So the most obvious improvement actually came well before I even started writing code, and that's getting these nice professional looking graphics. Now, we start out here in Figma. Figma is a design tool. You can use it for layout, you can use it for making graphics. It's really nice. So over the winter, I had this guy working for me, and he made me a bunch of cool stuff, including a nice little design system. So this way I have consistent colors to pick from, and hey, here's that IBM Plex Sans font again that I was using. And the value of this is it just takes a lot of the decision making out of the design process, because I just say, instead of just saying, oh, I should make it reddish, what sort of red should I choose out of the, millions of colors there are? Oh, I've just got 4 to choose from. So beyond that, and you'll see the design system in this new page, and for example, this background gray, this yellow, when I choose font colors here and here, that's these button colors all coming from the design system. Beyond that, though, if you have professional graphics, and you don't need a ton of them, as you'll see, I have maybe like 8 designs, but when you have some professional designs that you can add into your website, that makes it so much easier to build on those to build really nice looking pages. So here's just like the PKNC graphics universe if we zoom in a little bit. So if you look at it, basically, here's the design from the main page. Basically, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 designs, and then we can take out this typewriter, this magnifying glass, and stack of papers can be taken out separately as PNGs here. So it's a little more complicated than just the one design, but basically I am composing half a dozen designs together. And again, these designs were made by Jeev, they're not made by me. But you know, I paid for them fair and square, so I get to use them. And having just a few assets like this, as we're going to see when we go through the design of the site, is incredibly useful for putting together something that looks super polished. So let's not lose sight of the goal of the site. The goal of the site is not to show off these beautiful designs. The goal of the site is to sell copies of cold email for interesting people. And that starts with the layout, the order of information. And that part is actually pretty consistent between the two sites. So right now we're on the old original version. We have a header image, which, I made back before I knew anything about how to make images, which is why it doesn't look so good. And then we've got the text describing the problem statement, and we have the text describing the product that's supposed to address the problem. From here, we have the first call to action section. We have a little about the author, which is supposed to, take this from just some book to some book written by someone whose experience you can trust. We have an FAQ section, and then we have a second call to action. So, problem statement, product description, call to action, overcome objections, call to action. Pretty simple sales page structure with a bit of social proof mixed in. Next up, we still have the hero image on the new page. We still have the problem statement. It's a little bigger now. We have the first call to action, and then down here, we have the product description, so that's broken out a little bit. More social proof. In this case, it's broken out into its own section. Second call to action. Here's the about the author from earlier, and then again an FAQ section. So basically the same information, just in a slightly expanded and different order. So if the information hierarchy, which is the most important part of design, is like what order you present the information in, if that didn't really change, then what did change to make this look better? So the first thing I want to talk about with that is containers and backgrounds and margins. So if we take a look at the original site here, if you just block out the right and left sides of the page, you'll notice that everything is nice and aligned in this column down the center, which is good. You don't want on a big screen the page to be going end to end and the reader to be having to turn their head all the way back and forth to be able to read it. That's why all of the text snippets on this site are pretty short. They're not very wide. But the thing is, there's no variance here. As you're scrolling down, everything is 2 columns, which isn't good because basically as the reader, your eyes just sort of see a monotonous 2-column design, and there's nothing visually interesting about the page to flick to. And then if you compare that to the new one, so we still have 2 columns, we still have these margins, and there's never any information over here, but occasionally there's a background. So this background even has a nice little pattern on it. And then the 2-column stuff still exists, it just gets disrupted a little bit. In this case, the text goes back and forth, so your eyes have to follow it a little bit. Here there's 3 columns, which is disrupting this whole 2-column approach. And then again, we have this background spanning the full width to break up the page visually. And instead of 2 even-sized columns, we have 2 columns that appear very different sizes, even though their widths are quite comparable. 2 columns and 2 columns, but now it's a 3 and 9 sort of layout. 3 columns, 3 wide and 9 wide instead of a 6 and 6 down the middle. And again over here. And again, at the end, we have this lighter full width background delineating the sections. And so the importance of this is that if I just scroll up and down super fast here, it just looks like two mobile web pages right next to each other. But if I go on this page and I scroll up and down, there's actual blocks of different colors, and the stuff's in different arrangements. And so you can tell that you're going through a whole page instead of just something that looks like a super zoomed out iPhone page. And I referenced this before, but in both cases, the pages look okay on mobile. However, with this one, you have the header image way up here, and you have some weird stuff with the margins carrying over from the web version. Versus when you go to the mobile page on this one, you still have the copy up front. You have the designs, they reorganize themselves well, and then everything goes from edge to edge of the screen rather than being artificially shrunk. Like this picture doesn't have those weird margins that the other one had. So just taking time to think about how the containers and backgrounds are going to look did a lot for me in order to make this page feel more visually interesting. So the next thing I'm just going to do is go through section by section, and I'm going to talk about what makes each section, what improvements I made to each section that make it more effective. So if we go back here, we have an image, we have some text, and the text is broken up a little bit. That's nice, you know? I'm doing basically the same thing over here. Couple differences. I put the text on the right, and I made it... I put the text on the left, and I made it a little bigger. New font, which is nice looking. We still have a little bit of visual separation with I think this is a header 5 element. But I also wrap it with the image, because over here, I was sort of stretching the text to meet the size of the image. And I could have done that here. I could have kept this fully vertical layout. Oops. And I could have just written more text, but I didn't need more text. I wanted my copy to be as short as possible. So I took this and I wrapped it around the text. From here, one of the most similar parts of the site is this call to action versus this call to action. You still have, if we look at it all zoomed out like this, we still have green buttons, we have a header, we've got the same tweet. Difference is, this one talks about what the product includes, and... Oh, that's actually wrong. The handbook is 50 pages, not 25 pages. I gotta fix that. Sorry, back to our regularly scheduled video. It's basically the same thing. The main difference is what we already talked about with this background. And I'll tell you what, it seems like it should be super minor, but adding this little SVG background pattern made a world of difference in terms of making this a interesting thing, because it softens and it breaks up what would otherwise just be a huge blob of gray pixels, and it makes it seem like this call to action box is just sort of floating on top of the background. This section is entirely new. It's actually one of the first things that I built on the page. This was just me learning some more CSS and kind of showing off a little bit. We have, when you resize it, all of this stuff stays lined up and consistent, and then eventually the lines go away, and then eventually it folds into the mobile layout. And that part came from a library. It just took, not a library, but a template that someone else made. It took a little bit of work to get it to work with my copy and my images and just a slightly different layout. But that's another really key takeaway here, is that if you can find an open source template that's going to do 80%, 90% of what you want in any given section, just use it. You don't have to use the whole template for the whole site. You can just take out a single section, plug it in here, change it around so that it matches exactly what you're looking for, and boom, you have a super fancy, cool looking design with way less work than coming up with it from scratch. Again, the review section is new. This was super simple to make, and it'll scale to as many tweets as I want to put in it. It's just the bootstrap code column. It's sort of a masonry layout. So then we can compare the call to actions. So if you look, this one is the same thing, social proof on one side, a little bit of information about the product. I wanted to do something a little bigger so that this call to action fills up the entire page. The idea is that someone scrolls this far and then gets the book. I have a short summary of everything that you get, and this was the trickiest part to build because we have this huge background. Again, the pattern helps some, but a few key design decisions here. We have this being a little lighter background than this makes it stand out as sort of the primary field because there was a free download people could get, but I would rather them purchase the whole thing because that's what funds my company. And so I made this bigger, and it's also a little wider. This is 7 columns across. This is 5 columns across within this 12 column space here in the middle. And we have a green button instead of a blue button. We have this image from the header that people should recognize from the top of the page is in here again, this time vertically, sort of matching up with the different descriptions. And all of this is just designed to take what is actually a offset, weird-looking box and make it seem like the center of attention. And if you look at these curves here, we've got these curves here and here. So the reason these are opposite each other, it makes it look like they're sort of leaning against one another, like they're holding each other up. Like if you took them away from each other, they'd just roll on that little corner and fall over. But in this case, they're leaning against each other, and that makes it seem more centered, even though it's not. Like what's actually centered is this description, and that's what I want to be right in the center of the page is, hey, $48, you get all this cool stuff. And then the next section I want to address fixing is the about the author. The fixes for that were super simple. Just take the photo. It's actually the same size if you look at it on the screen. Here's the one. Here's the other. The photos are about the same size. But in this case, it's offset and there's less margin, which gives more space for copy about me and why I made this product. And overall, that just breaks up what I was talking about earlier, where everything was just right down the center. There's no variation from one section to another. This section is different than the ones before it, and that looks nice. I also used a new picture. It's a little zoomed out, just because this picture I use literally everywhere, so I wanted to have something a little different and fresh. And then finally, the FAQ section. This is one of the easiest ones to describe why the changes are good. So, all right, we've got big, all caps, red text in a cool font, Merriweather, versus lowercase, not even at the top of the section, header. Same color, but you can see how this header just does a lot more to enter the viewer's field of vision and say, hey, here we are. Again, I've got this 2-column design here, and the issue is that there isn't a ton of differentiation between the titles or the questions, which are just bolded, and then the answers right beneath them. And it's also kind of hard to scroll through and just skim it and see what the questions are. In this one, the questions are all on one side, meaning that it's super easy to just find the question you're looking for. The text is also a little bigger on this side than on this side. And they're separated, each one separated by this little line. And then over here is just, text in that new IBM Plex Sans font that I was talking about. And so this section just looks way better. The final thing, again, being this background color, giving it some visual separation from the rest of the page that these two faint little lines just aren't doing so much on this one. So if we put all that together, those little section by section changes. This site, I have time tracking. This site took me maybe 15 hours to put together. So I spent some real time on it. But it was just going through these things section by section and just figuring out these new design principles that I wanted to put in. And then the final step was fixing a few things on the copy. I'm not going to go through the whole page because this video is already pretty long. There's just a couple key improvements that I made that I want to talk about. First one, incite opportunity as a headline versus cold email for interesting people. Thing is, cold email for interesting people is already right here. It's in the URL, CEFIP. It's everywhere on this page. So I wanted to talk more about the reader, the potential customer here, saying, all right, what is this product going to do for you? It's going to incite opportunity. And then the problem statement's pretty much the same. And then again, instead of just saying like, get cold email for interesting people today, just saying, hey, this is the call to action box, I talk about what it's going to do for you. Write an email, change your life. Boom, that's pretty cool. You should do that. And then I take this super long click here to buy now on Gumroad. Super long, just buy now with the price. And the same thing down here, it's, chart a course. That's what they're doing. They're selecting a course, but also charting a course through cold email. It's like it's double meaning like that. And again, I had just have this buy now. The price is in really big letters. That's all important in the copy. And then the final bit of copy that I want to address is that sometimes when you're doing design, you have to be real careful with the length of your copy to make everything line up. So in order to get that thing that I was showing you earlier, where as you make the page smaller, that all collapses nicely, I had to make every single one of these approximately, like each one of these lines is maybe at most 10 or 15 characters difference from the other lines so that the text all breaks nicely. So sometimes you have to work within constraints like that to make a design work. So some people say you make your design, then you make your copy. Some people say copy, then design. In my case, I did the design because I knew that I could basically just take the copy from this old version. The copy wasn't the problem, the design was, and then just plug it in here and make whatever little changes I needed to make. So yeah, so that's how I made this, and I should say, I should have probably said this at the beginning, like, this is not the best web page ever made, and I'm sure that in the future I'm going to design even better looking pages, at least I hope I do. It's just that a lot of tutorials take you from either 0 to 1, like they take you from kind of like a blank page to something that looks like this, or they're teaching you how to make, I don't know, like, if we go to stripe.com, they're trying to teach you how to make something incredibly fancy like this, which is of course awesome looking, but took way more hours from way more competent engineers than I am to put together, versus something like this, which is just like a nice looking web page that's well within reach for most people to put together. So I hope this video showed you the thought process behind taking a website from, like a 5 out of 10 to sort of like an 8 out of 10, showed you the benefits of using professional looking graphics, maybe even having someone help make you a few graphics and composing them together, showed you the benefits of having a consistent style guide so that even like all of the graphics match all of the colors on the site, and then showed you that you can make really nice things using the same tools that you use for kind of basic stuff. This is still just a Bootstrap 4 site with a couple of little extra free things that are super easy to use mixed in. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'm going to put together a text-based version of this, so if you ever want to reference back to it, just go read the attached article. So thanks, have a great day.